All right. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rachel, and I'm the marketing manager for Asia Pacific here at Acquia. So today's presentation is called You've Got a CDP, So What? Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If you have questions for us, we are saving time at the end. So please be sure to use the Q&A or chat windows to submit your questions, and we'll bring them up at the end. This presentation is being recorded, and we will share it with you at the end of the session. So we have with us today Tony Peters, our pre-sales lead for Acquia Asia. Tony is a passionate technologist with experience in customer data platform, design, management, and deployment. As our pre-sales lead in Asia, Tony interacts with enterprise organizations and helps align IT strategies with direct business goals. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Tony. All right, Tony, take it away.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for that. So thanks a lot for joining everyone again. Hope you've been with us on the CDP series so far. As we mentioned, this is part of a series, a 4-part series. We're on number 2 now. The last session, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the differences between a CDP and a CRM. If you still don't know what the differences are, please go and watch that. And today's session, we're going to talk about the execution of data and how the CDP really comes into play about really turbocharging your marketing campaigns and actually talking coherently across your customer base. The next one is going to be talking more about the data sources, the engine, and what powers behind that execution of what we're talking about today. And then the last one is going to talk about, okay, you've got all of this, we've talked about the theory, etc., but how are our customers actually using this? So really food for thought and real world scenarios. So cracking on with today's episode, I can do a very quick recap on what CDP is. Some of you may have forgotten, this may have been your first time joining the webinar series, a very brief overview and recap. So if you look at this screen, we've got a bunch of boxes on the left-hand side. So that's really, these ones here, are really the data sources, okay? Now, we'll talk about lots of data, things like if you're e-commerce, you have point of sale, you've got like e-commerce data, email, what people have clicked on, etc. Call center data, like how people are engaging with you over the phone, email, chatbots, things like that. Even how your salespeople are interacting with customers, especially if you're B2B or in store. You've got website, learning a lot about behavioral information for people filling out forms, clicking on pages, downloading ebooks or promotional materials and things like that. You could have third party, maybe a part of a bigger group, or you've got relationships with people, or you're using companies like Experian, IOTA, companies like that, and really supplementing your data. Of course, many of you will have CRM as well. When you've got that known relationships with customers, you'll be using CRM, hopefully having data. Now, the CDP is going to sit in the middle. It's going to connect to and consolidate that data. It's going to give great insights. It's going to give machine learning. And it's also going to be able to use and push out that data in a consistent format to these execution channels on the right. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Be able to use that data and execute and really give that power to these execution channels and platforms, such as website personalization, call center, your outbound marketing, digital advertising, etc. But also allow you to share this data securely as well. So moving on after that brief overview, let's take a step back and look at data. Okay, and having data is great. We have huge amounts of data, access to huge amounts of data. But is that enough? If we just sit on that data, it can generally get a bit lost. Great, we can build a few reports, but quite often we're not doing too much with it. And I did mention in the last webinar that Forbes got a great quote from saying that CIOs are worried that actually they're not really using data enough. They have it, but they're not executing and using data as much. And that data is just getting more and more and more. You can go and look online, easy to find quotes and statistics about how much data is being generated. You know, you've got it coming out your ears. I read one today, 1.7 megabytes of data is created by every person during 2020, every second. You can probably actually believe that just by looking at your data usage on your phone. I'm sure you've gone away, or even if you go to somewhere like Woodlands near the Causeway, here in Singapore, if you're in Singapore, you go near a border, you suddenly jump across to another telco in another country, and suddenly your roaming goes whoa, bang, and you don't realize how much data you're using. That data is being pumped backwards and forwards, of course. But is having that data enough? So if we look at the Hulk, for example, great, you can get insights from this data. You can actually start to, really start to see some power by looking at the insights of that data. But as we probably see, if you look at some of the reviews and people's comments on the Avengers 4, you've got the Hulk, basically Professor Hulk. And lots of complaints about that is that actually the Hulk wasn't really doing much Hulk smash. He wasn't going that crazy. He was actually very timid. He was very powerful, but he was, in essence, using his brains more than his brawn, and it's great. You get some good insights, etc. But are you really using that data for that execution? And this is where I like to say the CDP really, really excels, is because it really uses that power and be able to really feed those execution channels and platforms is where that real strength comes in. So it's great, you've got the brains, you've got the insights, etc., but the insights feeding into that execution consistently across channels is really, really powerful and exciting. So let's have a little look about how generally people are using data at the moment, and hopefully some of this may resonate with you. You may be more advanced, some may be not. Many of our customers or people we speak to are not so advanced because it takes time and energy to do this, and we're always firefighting, especially this year. So we've got data platforms. Look on the left, we've got our data platforms: point of sale, email, website behavior, etc., analytics. And we've got execution platforms. And we know, we've already seen the charts where you've got thousands and thousands of execution platforms to be able to do stuff with data. Things like marketing automation, sending out emails, personalization, A/B testing, digital advertising platforms. All of these different execution platforms, they rely on data. Now, quite often they have their own data stores, or they all have their own data stores, but quite often they rely on their own data source to work in silo. Now, of course, they will tend to have APIs or ways of connecting with other things, but when you get started out of the box, they work in isolation. They all have their own sort of engines and workflows to use this data. So you think about website personalization. If you just use that on its own, it will have its own database, a little bit of tracking and things, and you set up the rules and engagement within the platform itself. The call center will have its own data. Platforms like Siebel, etc. They have their own data sources. You put this call center scripts in there. You have your logging, your call center logging, and things like that. Your outbound marketing, of course, you will probably feed in a marketing database, but that will become almost like a marketing database single source of truth for the marketing teams. You'll set up your marketing automation plans, your email contents and stuff in that platform itself. And the same with your digital advertising. Chances are you might be using a DMP to be able to feed that digital advertising to make sure you're sending to the right types of people and customers. But again, it's in isolation generally, especially when you start. Now, you will start connecting up those data pieces. And chances are you may be having a data lake or something like that. Very good chance you have a CRM, and you may start looking, okay, I have data there. This could be seen as a single source of truth, and you might start connecting that to other platforms, or your IT departments or partners are doing that. So things like your outbound marketing is a very good candidate to start connecting up with CRM. So you're feeding into that channel, and it starts to then use that data. The call center, obviously another good candidate for connecting up with CRM, because you might want to feed data also back to it, but you're still engaging and using that execution platform and just using that data kind of in isolation. And that's great, but you're using data and you're starting to get that consistency from that CRM data. Excellent. Now, as we move along and start to get a bit more advanced, you start to bring in other channels into this mix. But the problem you start to see here is, look at website personalization, for example. Now, most people who are doing things like website personalization generally only use the data from the website behavior to drive that personalization. Now, that could be via its own tracking, or it could be tying in with something like your, maybe you've got Google Analytics, maybe you're using something like Adobe, or you're using, maybe you're using Drupal and Acquia's own personalization engine that's got its own tracking and analytics, but it tends to be from the website only. Okay, which is great. It uses behavior and it updates, can be based on that data and great personalization experiences. But that website behavior data, are you connecting up to your outbound marketing? Probably not, or you may have plans to do it, but they keep getting pushed back, maybe because it takes time and resources, especially this year, you're continuously firefighting. Now that starts to bring a problem with things like consistency, doesn't it? Because you may be doing some great personalization based on that website behavior that someone is doing, but when you do the outbound marketing, are you able to get that same level of data? Now you may be able to get the same level, but it's going to be different data, because where's that outbound marketing data coming from? In this example, it could be from obviously the email clicks where someone has clicked on, and the CRM, but it doesn't necessarily know the website behavior. So you're starting to get a inconsistent messaging come across. So trying to get that consistency is very difficult in this space, because you're starting to get different data sources going to different platforms on here. So not only are you just getting that inconsistency of that message, because it's no fault of the marketing person, they're trying to do the best they can, but if you don't have the same data going across, it's going to get incredibly difficult, especially when you look at automation. We know the number of channels is increasing, social media, etc. You've got your own internal team silos as well, and your platforms are almost certainly working in silo in one way, shape, or form. That's going to give, by default, an inconsistent message and make life quite difficult. But not only that, these platforms are working in silo in terms of execution. Each one of these, things like the website personalization, generally you will go in and you will do the campaigns and things in that platform itself. You will choose the segment, you will go through and say, I want to do this via this rule. Okay, it's going to work, but you're going to have to set those rules and things like that up in the outbound marketing campaign platform. You're going to have to redo that work with the data that's got access to, and it may be a different segment because you don't have access to all that data. The same with the digital advertising. You do the rules and segmentation generally in the DMP platform. Call center is going to do its own thing with the scripting, etc. So now not only are you going to get inconsistent data across those, and your teams are going to do the best they can with that, but you're also having to redo a lot of work. You're going to have to work with slightly different segments, hopefully not too disparate, but they are going to be a little bit different. And you're going to have to do these workflows and campaigns and keep maintaining them and updating them in each of these systems. That's not going to make life very easy, and especially with the speed of the market moving this year. And we're actually doing a session about pivoting and digital transformation very soon, with one of our events coming up that our marketing person Rachel can share in the email follow-up to this. But generally, if you take too long to do these things in this day and age, I'd like to say you've missed the boat, because things move so fast and communication is really key. If you don't communicate properly and move with the times, you can easily get left behind, and competitors are always coming up, and someone that you didn't even see as potentially a competitor before can suddenly appear on the radar, and maybe they've started small and they've got a small customer base, but because they're doing things right, maybe got a good foundation, they start to actually start to overtake you, and you're like, whoa, what's going on here? So being able to move fast nowadays and keep a consistent message is getting more important than ever. So I've got a very quick example here. I'm going to just show one use case today, because the part 4 for our webinar is going to come through a lot more use cases, but I wanted to highlight this one. And this one is for a company called Wix. Okay, now you probably haven't heard of them in this region because they're actually a UK company, but think of them as like Bunnings in Australia that do things like DIY. They have like large warehouse stores that do like tools, garden furniture, plants, gardening, all this type of thing for DIY, plumbing supplies, B2B, B2C, that type of thing. But they were doing the same types of campaigns that we're all doing. Things like pulling a customer list for direct mail, executing Facebook campaigns, SMS, selecting data, CRM teams, accessing profiles, all these types of things. You see the tasks on the left would be familiar to you and your marketing teams. Now, before the Acquia CDP, they were having real trouble. You can see the time it was taken to do some of these, what we think are basic tasks. Things like putting a customer list for direct mail was taking about 2 weeks. And that was really unacceptable for the business, giving huge frustrations to the team. And of course, especially this year, look, if you're 2 weeks behind on doing something, it can be the matter of business or not business in your case, because yeah, rules are changing, lockdowns opening, things like that. Businesses are having to pivot much quicker than 2 weeks. We're talking days or hours to be able to react. So with the Acquia CDP in place, they were able to bring that down to just 10 minutes, be able to be agile enough and get on with their work without fighting it and staying relevant. It's not only just important, it's essential now, but they were then able to do it. So we will be able to share this recording and slides so you can have a look at this. And I do have a QR code in the top right-hand corner that you can have a look in more detail at this case study from us and Wix. So being able to not just stay consistent and get that messaging, but be able to do your jobs properly and at speed is great. So we go from this, that spaghetti but inconsistent and having to repeat yourselves with segmentation and workflow on there, to something that makes sense. And I'm going to show you now how the CDP can actually start to consolidate those that effort and actually make things consistent across these channels. So the first thing we would probably want to do is like choose who we want to speak to. So we could look at starting a campaign. So instead of starting a campaign in the individual execution channel, we're now going to start a campaign in the CDP itself, which is great. We're going to do one place to start the campaign, get the data and send it out. So in this case, we're going to choose, okay, maybe placed a transaction at least 30 days ago, but within 1 year. So we're going to exclude any customers that are over a year old that have bought something. But we're also going to use machine learning within the platform to be able to say, okay, what's their likelihood to buy today? Is this a good time for them to engage and buy? And is it a high likelihood? Because we're going to do this campaign. Maybe it's got some promotions that we don't obviously want to maybe send out too much and devalue our brand. So we're going to send this to the relevant types of people. And we should be able to have the machine help us. And we know that things like AI and machine learning, don't see them as a silver bullet to basically run everything for you, but they should be able to be helpers. And there's plenty of helpers that can be set up in a CDP side of things. So in this case, if there was some setup for this demo example for things like likelihood to convert today or buy, optimal email send time, recommending a product, were recommended a product in the past, for instance. But you can even use platform like Snowflake, for instance. You've got your own machine learning models, very particular to your own business, how you want to work, and be able to use these within the platform. So the platform needs to be set up, or has to be really set up, to work the way that you want with your own business, your own KPIs, etc. This is very important. You need flexibility. Chances are your business is going to be, a bank is going to be very different from an airline, to a retail store, to an education institution, to maybe a theatre or someone like that. You're going to have very different needs and wants, but you're going to have customers and you're going to be able to talk to them in your own way. And the machine learning is going to help you identify them. We're talking about help here, making things more efficient. So once we've chosen the type of audience we want, maybe we want to be able to split that audience. Now, this is a great feature because in this case, maybe splitting by city, because we want to have a slightly different message or promotion or something between each city. Now, typically, if we wanted to do this, you'd have to create a campaign for each city because they were a bit different. But in this case, we're creating one campaign and we're now splitting that segment between the cities. Okay, this is great. It's another level of efficiency. rather than creating multiple ones and having to then go and modify or monitor each one on its own. We're creating one and splitting it up. But not only can we just split this up at source, I'm looking at, and we can see here, I can actually even do an A/B test at source. Now, quite often we get a little bit, how would you say it, can't see the forest for the trees, so to speak. We get so embedded in what we do, we kind of think our voice is best when we're talking about our product or platform, but sometimes we need to actually let the customer actually tell us what they think is right. Sometimes we can't actually work that out ourselves. We need the customer to tell us. So in this case, it's great. We can actually test some content. We can test maybe promotions or something like that, but we can do A/B testing of this content and these campaigns at source. And if we think of the CDP as that source data, which is great because obviously many of the platforms you use like email marketing automation, personalization, website personalization, they have A/B testing, but otherwise you'd have to go and do them each individually in their own platforms, or maybe your platform doesn't even offer that functionality. But we can do it in one place here and it stays consistent across what we're sending out. This is great. This is another efficiency, and even building on the functionality of the execution platforms you may not already have or have to pay for. You have it in one place. So we may be doing some splitting of those segments. In this case, I've got city, but it could be loyalty scale or what they're at, how many loyalty points, maybe lead gen score, any of the attributes we can split on that you're bringing in. And okay, we've split those points, but then we can actually say we want to be able to send across personalized data across each of these splits. So in this case, maybe it's Chicago. I do apologize. This demo was set up with a sort of the US cities in mind, but think of it, it could be Singapore, Jakarta, Sydney, Melbourne, Manila, KL, etc. Whatever split that you want, it's up to you. Very flexible on that. But maybe we want to say the header for Chicago in this case, the header, because maybe we're sending out to emails, might want to say the best deal in town is a phrase that works well with people from Chicago. So we can actually personalize that data and send that across with like the email address, etc. We can give that segment name, the campaign name, so we can identify it to see what's working. We can send these off and split these out amongst our thing, all in that one campaign, rather than having to do the multiple campaigns. We can have those promotions, etc., that can be set up within here if need be. So this one's configured for retail, but when we come on board, and actually the platform that you're looking for with CDP needs to be configurable to your business, remember. So when we selected our audience, we set the personalization and content we want to push across, we can choose where we want to push it across. And in this case, in this example, I'm sending you across, first destination is going to be the Campaign Studio. This is Acquia's marketing automation platform for sending out marketing campaigns like email, SMS, etc. But where instead of sending and defining that list within the Campaign Studio platform, which you can do, you could have something like maybe Marketo, Eloqua, something like that you're using. But instead of setting up that list and using the data in isolation, we're actually sending the data now from the CDP in one place, in one campaign. Even with A/B testing and stuff, we're sending that and pumping that data into, maybe it's a predefined automation flow or segment or just a mail send out. But the second destination that we're pushing through is actually quite different. In this case, it's BlueKai. So we're actually now sending that data and those segmentation information to the DMP. And this is great because now we're getting consistency of message. Maybe we want to be doing a certain promotion, and that promotion, not only are we sending out to those known customers through maybe email in this case, and it's going to send out the promotions, but we're also tying in that campaign to the digital advertising. So this is really powerful. It means we've got not only consistency of message within there, so we're going to go and send out that message not only via the one-to-one communications, but with the eyes on the search engine advertising, maybe Facebook, etc. We're now actually putting those eyeballs on the on the same campaign, which is not only efficient in terms of being able to do things and execute, because we're doing it from one place and pushing out, but also from a cost point of view, because now we're not actually just paying for adverts that are not necessarily relevant. We're actually keeping it consistent and only serving those ads that are relevant to the people. So now we're actually, instead of trying to take ages, doing something, missing the boat and not being consistent in our message, and even things like with digital advertising, wasting money on here, the old ways or the ways that you might be working, really with the tools like CDP, they're poor value. You're actually getting poor value, you're firefighting, you're replicating work and not getting consistency. With the CDP, you're actually able to, well, say no need to fight the platforms, I want to say, be able to execute properly, be consistent and use the platforms with what they're great at, those execution tools, but with a consistent data set that's coming from many different ways and hopefully going to be much, much quicker to implement than integrating all of those one-to-one, that spaghetti, so to speak. So let's do a little summary of what that brings you. Efficiencies. Efficiencies are really important nowadays. We know that we are running lean teams. We have to. Many people working from home, etc. Efficiencies are different from what they used to be before. We're working in very different ways, but there's many, many platforms and channels you're working with. So instead of having to fight that system, you need to be able to be efficient with it and have that data and be efficient with that. Also your IT, your partners, etc. Spending all this time on integrations, and especially when your platforms are changing all the time as well, it's not very efficient from the actual delivery side as well, and implementation side. Time to market is exceedingly important, in especially this year. It's always been important, but now you're really seeing the time to market is incredibly important. If you're not sort of, you've got to be in it to win it, so they say. If you're being slow, taking 2 weeks to get your lists up, your Facebook campaigns are taking weeks, etc., you're going to miss the boat. It's going to be absolutely terrible for your business. You're also going to have much better data everywhere. Okay, these platforms, execution platforms, yes, you want to be able to feed in those. They've probably got great APIs, data dumps, etc. But your IT teams and partners, they take time to do this. Okay. You tend to get committees, they take time, the implementation, it's a strong investment, and it takes a long time. Then you go and change a platform, it has to start again. It's a never-ending battle that you have to go with integrations. If you're within the marketing team now, you probably understand the pain of that. You're like, where is this integration? It takes a long time, but you want to have that consolidated data, a great view, not just for insights and stuff, which we're going to talk about in the next session, but that execution across these platforms. It's going to be such a nicer way of working, which brings across that consistency. That consistency of message as well is very important. So just that example that I talked about was just that one example of consistency. You're sending out an email campaign to people, then you want to make sure that your digital advertising, when they go on the Facebook, Google, etc., they're seeing that kind of same message. Okay, making sure that it's consistent and you're not wasting money and resources doing a spray and pray, so to speak, or a shotgun approach. You're actually executing properly. So I'll go back to that Hulk analogy of actually, it's not just brains we're talking about here, but it's that power of execution across the board. So hopefully now you can see the power of a CDP, what it can bring you in terms of execution, how it can really boost, not replace, but really boost those execution tools, such as your marketing automation, website personalization, call center, digital advertising, where obviously that's a dollar investment that you can trace and track and see ROI. You want to make sure those are as efficient as possible, you're using them properly, and getting great data across with it. So to finish up, we're going to actually send in the chat window a link. It's just appeared. It's going to be a short survey. We'd love your feedback. Again, we got some great feedback on our last session. Please take some time out and fill out the feedback, because it helps us not just for our own benefit to understand, but it also helps us make sure we tailor the message to you. It's data, isn't it? We want to take that data and make sure we're giving the right message to you, because yeah, you've taken some time out to listen to me today, which is great. And I thank you very much for that. But we want to improve all the time, just like you want to do with your business. So again, this was the second part of our CDP series. We talked about the differences in the CRM. You're going to get a recording, link to a recording of that one, a link to recording and the information from this one as well. Our next one is going to talk about the data and the engine, things like the identity resolution, householding, and different data sources that's really powering that execution I just talked about in our next webinar. And then in our last part is going to be talking about, okay, you've got all of this, we've talked about the theory, but what about some real use cases? So really some real food for thought is going to be in that session. But we're going to mix it up a little bit on our next session and bring in our Marketing Cloud Director for APJ, Phil Coop. So Phil's got a wealth of experience. He's been doing global businesses, leveraging technology, growing revenue, reducing costs, driving customer engagement. He's got some great stories to tell. So he's been working with things like telcos, etc., human-centered design, and he's going to talk to you about the data, some of his stories, and then and how we've actually used the platform to mix it up a bit. So please do fill out that survey. Please do look forward to the recording of this and share it out amongst your colleagues if you find it useful or you think they might find it useful. And again, thank you very much for listening. Hope it gives you more of an idea of the real power of that CDP. And I'm going to pass it back to Rachel now. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you so much. All right. So if anyone have any questions, please feel free to use the chat windows or the Q&A tab. All right. So we'll pause for a while here to wait for any questions. Okay. So other than that, thank you guys for attending this session. Like what Tony mentioned, the slides and the recording of this webinar will be posted on our website and it will be sent to you via email as well. So please be sure to look out for that. Okay. So I guess we don't have any questions for now, but please fill out the survey through the link that we sent through the chat. Other than that, okay. We shall wrap this up and we will see you again soon. Thank you guys. See ya. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.